In this session, we're going to talk about Turbo360 in the context of customers who are migrating from BizTalk to Azure Integration Services. Before I jump into this session, I just want to shout out about a few other things going on these 2 days. So the first thing is at the Turbo360 booth upstairs, we've got a bunch of QR codes for things like white papers people might be interested in. We've got this one about our cost assessment, and we've got a few goodies that people will get sent after the conference if you fill in or get one of these white papers, so please check them out. And also in about 2 slides time, I'm going to have a poll up. There's a short link for it now. It's the same link as yesterday, so if anybody's got it cached, that would be good. The other thing is, I don't know if anybody realizes this, but at the same time as the main sessions in here, we've been recording a whole bunch of podcasts at the same time in one of the back rooms. So Lex and I have been, if you've seen us running backwards and forwards, that's what we've been up to. So I think we've done about 8 podcasts, 9 podcasts a day. And I'm really keen that, Integrate doesn't end today. We want content happening after Integrate, because I think, keeping people engaged in a learning experience for us all is a good thing as we go through the rest of the year towards the next Integrate. So a lot of the speakers who've been up and just otherwise some interesting community members, I've kind of chatted about some of the sessions. So you'll see those coming out on YouTube over the coming weeks. What I'd also say is we beyond today, we do a lot of other community activities. So if people have got something interesting going on, some technology you're learning or project you're doing that you want to share with other members of the group, please reach out to us because we can facilitate podcasts. We're always looking for guests. Today we're going to talk about BizTalk to Azure Integration Services. And I was kind of thinking through these slides the other day, and to me it's a bit like a marathon, isn't it? We've all been at various stages of our BizTalk to Azure migration. For some of us for a number of years now, some of us might even still be going, some of us might be done. So I wanted to get a flavour on my poll here about where people are. So, I chat to a lot of people in the breaks and before the event, and this is a common thing where I think a good theme I get is that a lot of people haven't actually started yet. A lot of people are in progress. Not that many people are finished or fully finished. I think a lot of people are doing a phased migration. The other thing I'm interested on for Integrate this year is how many people aren't BizTalk at all, because we've got a lot of new people who've never been at Integrate before. So how many people have not even got BizTalk? But I think the general theme on this slide is what I expected of most people are in progress. Everything else is about even there. So thank you for filling my poll in. So if I think about, let's take a step back for a minute and just think about the big picture here. So this was the typical BizTalk diagram of where, the different features in my integration platform. And the reason I partly like this slide was, BizTalk's not the only integration technology that we used in BizTalk world. So I always like to, let me see if I can just add my pen here. So I always like to remember that my integration team would also use things like SSIS back in the day. WCF was always a really big part of our integration. And we also had all the BizTalk components in here. So whether it was BRE, message box, rules, a good one is obviously this week we've had a number of discussions about rules. Microsoft have got that preview project going at the minute. Dan's session earlier today was about rules. For us at Covi, we always pictured ourselves on this diagram down here with helping for the monitoring and management. And when we transitioned to Azure, we've got a similar diagram here. So the interesting bit about the Azure Integration Services is where BizTalk was much more of a box with a number of things in it. Azure's more of a platform play where there's all these different components. And if I think, just to call a few out, we've got API management, we've got service bus over here. These might be part of your integration platform, but they might also be used by your organization for other solutions that in your customers' head, they're probably not necessarily part of their integration platform. They're just part of an application itself. Now, when we're building solutions, the likelihood is, the people in the room here are probably going to be using logic apps, you're probably using functions, you're probably using API management. But there'll be other things where, Matthias' session yesterday talked a lot about the VNet integration, so that's becoming something where, a couple of years ago, not that many people were really thinking about that. This year, probably everybody's thinking about it. We also have that relationship with things like Power Automate, so your integration platform may need human workflow to help you. You might integrate Logic Apps and Power Automate together to get that user interaction. When it comes back to co-vice position, so in this talk, I'm really in my role as product owner for Turbo360. The way I like to think about Turbo360 products down, again, in this management and monitoring area. So we've got some tools from Microsoft, Azure Monitor, App Insights, etc. We think the same gap that you had back in BizTalk world, why you needed BizTalk360. The customer would always come to us and say, right, I've got these tools, I need BizTalk360 because I need something a bit more than that. And we think that use case still exists with Turbo360, but I think it's bigger than that on Azure, bigger than just what BizTalk had. We have customers who have the use case for cost management, business activity monitoring, business applications and documentation, which is why we think the product fits really well with a wider than just the native support. And we're going to talk about that a little bit in this session today. Now, what I wanted to do first is just, let's go, forget Turbo360 for a few minutes. Let's go over the comparison between BizTalk and Azure and just consider the tools side by side. So we've got an integration platform. We've migrated BizTalk to Azure. What are your compatible features if you're a BizTalk user? So the first one, everybody knows the BizTalk admin console we've got over on the left here. We like that because regardless of how our host model's deployed and where things execute, we get this centralized view of messages in BizTalk, the components, the configuration. But in Azure, we've got a very different experience. So we've got the Azure portal is probably the closest direct relationship. Now, I know Microsoft have talked a little bit about the integration environment concept, but if you think of my diagram a few slides ago, the problem is that with integration environment, we really only have, number one, it's still in preview, but number two, it's really only Logic Apps, Standard, Service Bus, and I think it was API management, if I remember right. But my integration platform is probably using way more than that. And also there's the use case about what if I'm even supporting things that are beyond my integration environment? Do I want this single sort of admin console equivalent to help me? Now in BizTalk world, the next thing we had was the event log. So, let's face it, the event log was probably the most important tool if you were a BizTalk admin. Everybody used it the minute you had a problem. The equivalent in Azure Integration Services is really something like Log Analytics or App Insights. That's where you're going to find your deep error messages and telemetry about what's going on. We then go to Message Box Viewer. So this is a really interesting one for me about the difference between BizTalk and Azure. So the message box view in the admin console give me this central place, all of my messages, I can see my history. I go into Azure Integration. Now I've got many Logic Apps that are all separate, all in different places, different resource groups, different subscriptions, and each of those have their own run history. So it's difficult for me to get this holistic view of across my environment, where are all my messages, what's got errored, how, out of my 100 Logic Apps, how many of them have had errors this morning? These questions start becoming that bit more difficult to answer. We then have tracking. So in BizTalk, we could open a message and we could open what in my head, because it's years since I've done BizTalk, was still called Hat, but I'm sure it had a more modern name for a while after that. You'd see that history down here of the stages of a message, whether it be a pipeline or an orchestration. And probably the closest equivalent now is the history that you would see here in App Insights. You'd see that distributed trace of the dependencies that have executed, the actions and that kind of thing. And what's quite good is that App Insights lives across both Logic Apps, and it'll live across things like functions as well. You might hit some limitations. It won't cover things like consumption Logic Apps, but probably most people are using standard ones today anyway. We then had message view itself. So I've got a run instance. I want to see the actual message that executed. So in BizTalk, we had the admin console. You can open a message. Today, you're going to go to a Logic app and you can see the run history. And I think for me, as an integration person, probably one of the biggest, it's been around for years, but the biggest benefit of Azure integration from a support perspective over BizTalk was just being able to see that really easy run history in a Logic app. Really makes my life a lot easier than it used to be in BizTalk. Suspended messages, I think just in the interest of time, I'll just jump over a couple of these a bit quicker. So we still had suspended messages in the run history. Orchestration debugger, we always used to be frightened to turn on the orchestration debugger because people would forget it was turned on, but we had that experience of, what are the steps my workflow executed, whereas we get that all the time in Logic apps now, probably with the exception of a stateless one, unless you turn on run history for it. So again, that's a big move forward for Azure Integration Services. We always, in BizTalk world, we always had things like PAL and Perfmon were tools we would often use. So, the number of times I think years ago we'd end up looking at throttle encounters and message queue lengths in Perfmon to troubleshoot performance problems. And if you're coming into the Azure world, again, this is where App Insights starts helping you. I know Kent's announced a few features this week that are going to sort of enhance these capabilities, but really under the hood, that App Insight experience here is probably the closest to what you'll get for what PAL was previously. Now, business activity monitoring is an interesting one for me as product owner of Turbo360. So we had on the left here business activity monitoring. On the right, we've got Azure Integration Services, where we have the business process tracking, which was announced last year. This year we're in preview, and at some point it'll GA, and I think there's a few other enhancements Microsoft are doing. At Turbo360, we've had a business activity monitoring capability for about 5 years. Customers have been using that really successfully for quite a while. We'll talk about that in a few slides' time. And I think there's a real good question here about if you're a BizTalk customer when you're migrating, did you use BAM in BizTalk? Probably not everybody used it. I think, thinking back, I vaguely remember like 20-30% of BizTalk people were actually using BAM. But when we move to Azure, we're going to be thinking, reinventing how we're doing integrations. Probably you're not going to just lift and shift. You're going to hopefully re-architecture to simplify and make things better. And I think this idea of, democratize integration, bring users into the experience of integration so they can see what's happening and they can engage with your interfaces, whether it be check messages, reprocess messages, without having to escalate support tickets across multiple escalations to a developer. That's really where your integration team can change from being seen as the blocker and the problem area to being the thing that really empowers the business. So regardless of whether you're looking at, there's a number of third-party products out there. Microsoft have got an offering as well. That it's something really I think you should think about as part of your architecture change. Now, where I really want to talk about from a Covite perspective is the last mile. So where customers come and talk to me is they'll go and deliver a solution on Azure. In this case, we'll do our BizTalk to EIS migration, and they'll get things live. They may run it for a little while, and then they'll come to us and say, you know what, we've been running this and it works, but it's just painful. We need something to help us to get that last mile, to get this, lower our cost of ownership, empower us to be focused on development instead of focused on support, and to make our users get involved in this. This is where Turbo360 really comes in this last mile. So if I think of the journey you go through in development of your BizTalk migration, so you're going to start with development, you'll do maybe some requirements gathering, you're probably going to have this big problem reverse engineering your BizTalk setup to what it might look like in Azure. You're going to go into testing, you'll go live, you'll hit this last mile, and then you'll come out to third parties. And really, from my perspective, this is where I want to kind of say to people out there, look, if you're doing BizTalk migration, rather than wait until you get to the last mile, come and chat to us back here and here, because I think there's things we can do that'll make the journey easier for you. You don't want to be exhausted by the time you get to the last mile. Come and chat to us. We'll give you a drink of water. We'll give you some encouragement. And, we've got all this content migrations anyway. and we can help you on this difficult journey of a BizTalk migration. So we're going to next look at what in Turbo360 can help me with that journey for my migration. So starting off with, we've got this business applications module. This is aimed at how do I support my solution in the real world. Now, as I say, it's not just for BizTalk and not just for integration. Sorry, it's not just for Azure integration. It can be other things. So you can have side by side a Power Automate being monitored alongside an integration solution that might be logic apps and functions. You might have I've even got demos of things like a LAMP stack application. So I think for your support organization, you're going to have this transition of developer. You need to transition this solution so that the support team can look after it. And if you can give them this single console to support multiple different types of solution, we think there's a lot of value there. We're going to talk about business activity monitoring, and we'll look at how to empower self-service integration, which I think is a really good use case for people. I'm going to touch a little bit on cost management and documentation, but we talked about those yesterday quite extensively, so I'll focus most of my time on the two on the left today. Okay, so IT operations, what do we actually need to be successful in production with our integration platform? So in BizTalk, we had BizTalk 2020 or earlier. You needed BizTalk360 to help you. Azure integration, I think you need Turbo360, which is why I'd like you guys to chat to me. Really what you want, though, is this centralized hub for the operations team. That use case of, I want to stop all of your support calls going to a developer to do even the most basic things. I think something where, as a developer, you enjoy developing new solutions, writing logic apps, etc. You don't want to be chasing down silly error messages like, where's order 50? What happened to this message? Even like, one of the things I see in customers is other application teams have a lot of familiarity with interfaces for their application. BizTalk, the old joke was that BizTalk was the best error logging system you'll get for all of your other systems, because all the systems throw errors, the integration platform catches it, logs it, and then we tell them what their error was. They fix it, and we resume the run, and that probably was like 80% of the errors we ever dealt with in BizTalk, and actually it's exactly the same right now in Azure. So if we can empower even those application teams to come and be able to support stuff, then it's going to help out. So at this point, I'm going to just jump over to my Turbo360 portal and just show you a little bit about what this would look like. So here, I'm in the business applications module. And the first thing that we need to do is we've got this complicated landscape of, I've got all these resource groups, all these subscriptions, we've got land and zones, we've got, some customers even have different tenants, and everything's everywhere. And if I've got 500 logic apps and 100 APIs with 20 operations per API, function apps, and it just becomes overwhelming. You can't understand where to find stuff. So what we try to do in Turbo360 is we're creating this tree view where you can model what your architecture looks like. So a common way I've done this in my enterprise integration team here is I'll have things like the platform assets. So I've created groups for, things like my app service plans, my service bus namespace, my APIM namespace. I want to group them together, which I do in my platform area down here. So you'll see that there's quite a few things I've got down here, and some of them have got monitoring on. And that really, for my integration team, they're the things that I want my service owner of integration to be responsible for making sure these run well. Now, there'll be different integrations that solve different business problems, but they all depend on this underlying platform. And if the platform breaks, multiple of these applications are probably going to break as well. So we need to, we want our experienced people to focus on that area the most. But then where we can start really getting the L1 and L2 support people is going to be down in this area here, the integration apps. So this is the individual interfaces that support specific business requirements. So I'm going to look at quite a simple one today. This one's a really simple integration. In fact, I think I can show you on my service map here. So this is a logic app, and all it really does is it gets data out of the HR system, does some transformation and delivers it to the benefits partner. I think I touched on this one actually yesterday in the knowledge management session. Now, I've got some other ones here. I'll just show you one. You can see this one's got API management, service bus in it. So you can have all these different resources together. And this bit's not limited to integration. You could have a web app in here. You could have an AKS namespace or something like that. It's really about creating this logical grouping. So you've got a support view. When that L2 support operator comes in and goes, we've got a problem with the employee benefits integration. He doesn't go to Azure and go, I don't know where to start. He comes to Turbo360 and he goes, right, here's the employee benefits integration. Ideally your monitoring's triggered an alert, so it's flagging up red to say there's a problem. And then he might go to the service map here and he can click on one of these things and you can see there's the metrics we're currently monitoring. And you start zoning in on this problem. So you've got an issue. How do you zone into where the actual cause of the issue is? Here we can see, this is the logic app's the problem, and we can start doing lower level troubleshooting from there. Now, I guess, in the interest of time, really what I want to get across is this is the support view that'll help you go beyond the monitoring. We've got a bunch of features like how can I create automated tasks? So a common one would be service bus dead letter queue. You can create a task that your support operator can run on demand to resubmit dead letter messages. You can have them scheduled once a week, that kind of thing. One of the common questions I get, so I remember Simon over in the yellow t-shirt over there, who's probably the only person I can really make out in the audience with the light shining actually, but Simon asked me this great question, and I love hearing things like this from partners, so please feel free to reach out with questions. But he said, Mike, I really struggle to set up my monitoring when I'm with a customer. What does Turbo360 do that makes my life easier? And that's exactly the question I want to hear from partners, because if you think of that problem, I've got all these million resources in Azure. Where do I even start setting up this monitoring? And it takes a long time to do it. I find a lot of people do you spend a lot of time getting to the absolute basic level of monitoring and you just end up missing stuff. And usually there's a problem and then you put the monitoring in for that one resource. And, I would argue a lot of customers probably have a really poor monitoring setup at the minute. So what we talked about with Simon is a couple of things. So number one, if we take the logic app here, instead of getting lost in Azure Monitor, setting this up, it's just on the logic app. There's a bunch of metrics here. You can monitor the state. We can monitor the run history. You tick a box. In this case, I'm saying, monitor the run history of if I had 2 errors since I last checked, throw an error. And what I really want to get to is I don't want you to spend ages setting it up. I want you to go tick done and move on to the next thing, because you don't want to be spending time doing this. You just want it to do it for you. Where our tool really starts helping though is this is easy to set up. We've got advanced features we can talk to people about another time about auto correction and help notes of what does the support person do if there's an issue. But really one of the things you can do, we've got this feature about monitoring profiles. So I can go and set up a profile for my organization that says, any integration solution I've got, the default for monitoring a logic app looks like this, the default for APIM looks like this, and so on. And then when I create one of these applications, I just say, use my profile, and it'll apply all those default settings to all the resources you add. So really there I've gone from 0 to right up at the last mile. I've gone in like that. I'm just done just by adding the resources. And then what I might do is I might have one specific resource that I want to monitor a bit less aggressively, so I might just tune that. And that's really where, as a consultant or a developer, I want you to spend your time is just those fine-tunings at the end, and I think that's a better use of your time. Now, just in the interest of time for the session today, I'm going to leave business applications there, but I'd love to hear who would like to know more about this in future talks. We can reach out to us and we can do demos with you guys. The next one is self-service integration. So here we're looking at that BAM use case. I've got, either I've got business activity monitoring already, or I've got a requirement to create visibility of my integration. If you do this, I can guarantee you're going to reduce support tickets, because we've seen customers doing this all the time. We're going to create more confidence in our solution. And actually with one customer, thinking about the testing of a project, I think it's a good use case where I say this end-to-end life cycle of that migration journey. I've had business analysts and business users in supporting UAT testing, because they can see what an integration does. They can troubleshoot a problem. They get the application team to come in and fix it. And really the huge win for me was my integration developers didn't need to be involved in UAT testing. They just got called in if there was an issue they couldn't fix themselves, because 80 to 90% of the time the issue was that somebody put bad data in the system. One of the target systems had an error, and it wasn't really an integration problem. So that's really how this can start helping you now. If we're over in business activity monitoring here, so here I'm looking to create a business process friendly view of my integration. So if I take a look at, we'll take a look at my person sync one in the HR department here. So this is a demo we have running with multiple records every day, simulating new users joining the organization. And here what we're looking to do is we've got different integrations. So you'll see these transactions here: add user to group, activate mailbox, new hire to Active Directory. These are all different interfaces that are executing. And you can see, Mika here is a new employee. So the question would be things from the business team like, oh, we onboarded Mika. She doesn't seem to be working in this application. What happened? That's a support ticket normally. But here we could go into BAM and we could just do a search for Mika's records and see everything that happened. And actually a good example is we'll see Lauren down here. We can click on her and see actually there was a problem with her existing user lookups. They may have put like a bad username or something in the HR system which couldn't be created in Active Directory. And here I can open it up and we can start optionally letting users see what messages look like. So I think that actually we want to go back a step. We'll look here and we could see what was the data that triggered this integration. So a lot of the times I find teams have these sort of business super users who are really kind of quite comfortable knowing a little bit of the technicalities about the systems they depend on. So in this case, that error, the HR super user could come in and they could see, oh, here was the data that came out of our HR system. Oh, that person has this thing wrong. And quite often it would be the case they hadn't set something right. They go back and fix it. They re-trigger the interface. So an example here would be they could go in from Lauren, let's say they fix the data, they can just reprocess the integration direct from Turbo360, drops it back on Service Bus, so you can configure how you want it to reprocess, and that'll go and re-trigger that integration. Now, in the interest of time, there's a lot more to BAM that we can talk about more directly with people if they're interested, but I want to show you what the art of what you could achieve is. And I think our roadmap will align quite nicely with what Microsoft are doing in their investments is what I hope. And I think Turbo360, we want to be this user-friendly, you're not in the Azure portal, you're in a tool that we can easily train business people and IT support people who aren't Azure experts. We can teach them how to use this to get the value from self-service integration is where I want us to be. Okay, so I guess one other thing actually on BAM's quite interesting. So BAM's not just logic apps. I think it's a really important one. So we have customers who've used BAM with function apps, Synapse pipelines, Data Factory, Power Automate's quite a popular one because you've got all these different Power Automates all over the place. Can I have a single place to go and see what they're doing? I've even had customers come to me and say, look, we do Databricks jobs. I want the users to be able to get told some useful information about some of these Databricks jobs. Can we put that in BAM so they see that? And at the end of the day, your super user and your support operator, they don't really care whether it's Databricks or logic apps. They just want to know, did it start running? Did it finish? Was it successful? Did it fail? That's the core requirement for those people. So we're starting to see People ask about things like Databricks, even PowerShell scripts. We know we've got this mission critical PowerShell script that runs on a VM somewhere. Can we emit telemetry for BAM to show people what's going on? So cost management, this one's a really interesting one for me. So I talked about it yesterday, so we'll not deep dive too much, but BizTalk to Azure changes how you need to think about cost management. Before, for a developer, you probably didn't really care. For the person who paid your licensing, you really had to think about this. What's my VM cost or my server cost? What is my BizTalk licensing? Did I can't remember the name of it, software assurance, so did I pay every year or did I pay one-off? When you move to Azure, the cost changes significantly, so you're going to be charged per hour, maybe sometimes per month, but most likely per hour or per execute. So that really, there's big advantages of that and some disadvantage. The big advantage is you can pay for what you use as opposed to pay for a massive server and only use a part of it. That can bring the cost down of integration. I think somebody asked me this morning, if I spend £1 million a year on BizTalk, how much is it going to cost me on Azure? That's obviously a really difficult question. That depends on many things, but I would hope that many customers will be expecting that my Azure should cost less. The problem is it can cost more if you don't use Azure effectively. That's really why I think cost management's a big challenge for customers and why I wanted to make such a big talk yesterday about that. Hopefully, the takeaway is people have got a lot of things to think about how do you be efficient, how do we, even visibility of the costs. So I think you'll see us doing a lot of content in this space, which hopefully gives people things to look at. And then documentation. So I know Sandro commented on my slide last week. We've got the old BizTalk documenter tool here. So a little shout out for Mark Brimble, who I think's been watching online. I think Mark had quite a bit to do in the end with the BizTalk documenter tool, I think, as it went through its life cycle. But BizTalk Documenter was a tool people used to document what have I got in BizTalk, what is it configured like. But Azure's 10 times more complex than BizTalk in many ways because everything's spread out and everything's a different type of product. So those documentation use cases come back into play, and hopefully yesterday we give you a lot to think about with that as well. Okay, so my takeaway, there's a couple of key things here. So number one, BizTalk to Azure, it's a marathon, not a sprint. I think the slides at the start of the poll really set that expectation. People are in partway through their journey. Last mile is the difference between you having operational excellence versus you having a painful experience after you go live. We want customers who come to Turbo360 to not wait till the last mile and come and have a chat with us earlier. We think you'll get benefits from doing that. If you're a BizTalk360 customer, we're starting an initiative to help people transition. So we want BizTalk360 customers to find it as easy as possible to transition to Turbo360. So if you're an existing BizTalk360 customer, we'll be reaching out to you to talk about this. We want to accelerate your journey and or come and chat to us at the booth upstairs and we'll arrange some chats to go through this in a bit more details, but we think you'll like what we've got to offer. Hopefully that was a good session for everybody. Questions, I think in the interest of time, just come and grab us at the booth. But thank you for listening to my talk and I hope everybody enjoys the rest of today.